Literature review. 600 to 700. Yes. Method. 800. Yes. Analysis. 1200 to 1400. Yes. Discussion. 500 to 600. Yes. References. No limit. In text yes. Reference list no. Appendices. No limit. No. Submitting your assessment. Remember to use the cover sheet, downloaded in week 1 or 2. One document everything all must be in the one Word compatible document. PDFs will not be accepted. No audio required, just your interview transcription and interview questions in the appendices. If you want to include examples of coding, then please do so. Where? Moodle submission point under the Assessment tab, under Submission. Points /feedback area. File submission name, student number _PSY 5046. For example 123456789 _PSY 5046. Participant consent forms in the submission point labeled consent forms. Extra time. Teaching staff cannot provide additional time. Must apply for extenuating circumstances through MySRS, outlined on the Moodle page. Students with support summaries may be eligible to apply to. Students with SS and fluctuating conditions clauses must request the additional time via Well-being. 10 working day EC provides extra time or a review of performance. EC defers the deadline to July 2024. Late policy is still there for individuals. Please use if necessary. Submission information. Assessments submitted up to 1 hour after the published deadline will receive no penalty. This will ensure that students will not be unfairly penalized for any slowing of systems around deadlines. Please note you should still aim to upload by the published deadline. Assessments submitted between 1 and 24 hours after the published deadline will be reduced by 5% of actual mark. For example, an original mark of 60% will be reduced to a mark of 57%. Assessments submitted between 24 hours and 1 week, 5 working days, after the published deadline will be reduced by 10% of actual mark. For example, an original mark of 60% will be reduced to a mark of 54%. Any reduction in the original mark will not be applied if you have a support summary detailing an extension. The mark is below the pass mark for the assessment, 40% for undergraduate or 50% for postgraduate. The reduction, either 5% or 10%, will reduce the mark to below the pass mark. In this case, the assessment will be capped off at the pass mark if already passed. Any work submitted more than 1 week, 5 working days, after the published deadline will continue to not be marked, resulting in a fail for the assessment. Assessment tips. Check the assessment guidance document and the marking criteria. Make sure you ask your workshop tutor any final questions in the Week 12 workshop. Have you included all the required sections? Included all the required information? Included a clear rationale for your research question? This is your literature review. Ended your literature review with your research question. Justified your methodological decisions, using academic references. Presented your analysis appropriately. See example in assessment guidance document. Referenced your citations using APA 7 style, not Harvard. FAQs. Do I include citations in my analysis section? We'd rather you didn't just focus on your participants and what they're saying. How do I work out my overall grade for PSY 5046? Report grade X 0.9, plus, ethics quiz X 0.1, equals overall grade. Do I need to submit the audio with the report? Nope. Just the 2 transcripts and approved interview schedule. I can't get the line numbers to work, they appear throughout. You can either remove them entirely, or suppress for current paragraph when highlighting the rest of the report. Any questions? Next week. No lecture but online videos for you to view about conducting a qualitative dissertation project. Workshops take place as usual. Make sure you make the most of this final opportunity to ask your workshop tutor questions. Feedback forum to be held Friday the 8th of December 9 a.m. in the coffee pod. We need L5 reps. You said. We did. Would be nice to include some more Menti links within the lecture slides. Record lectures to look back on when missed or revising. Having faster replies from all module leaders and understanding how to help individual students. Thank you for the suggestion. We will consider increasing engagement and interaction this way. This is a faculty/university decision. We encourage students to do the recommended reading alongside attending lectures, as this also expands on the content and helps with your knowledge acquisition. The forum is a good way of receiving help and support, and if emailed, we do have 2 working days, 48 hours, to respond to students. Often the queries we receive are items that are located on Moodle already, FAQs for instance, or have been covered in sessions. The weekly 2-hour assessment sessions allow for workshop leaders to provide help to individual students. To see all responses and replies, visit the PSY 5046 Moodle page. #Student Voice. #Student Feedback. A practical guide to thematic analysis. Phase 2, Coding the Data, the 30th of October, 2024, the 11th of October, 2024, 11/39. Dr. Keeley Abbott. TW/CW for consent/assault. Overview. Reflexive Thematic Analysis, Braun and Clark, 2019. Methodological Procedure. 6 phases of analysis. Applied to data. Tips for conducting a good quality TA. Quality criteria. Reflexive TA, Braun and Clark, 2006. Familiarization with the data. Coding the data. Generating initial themes. Reviewing and developing themes. Refining, defining and naming themes. Producing the report. Phase 1, Data familiarization. Repeat listening / reading of the data recording. Read through each transcript individually. Note down, on a separate piece of paper, items of interest. Read actively and critically. Assumptions. What is familiar / unfamiliar? TW/CW for consent / assault. Phase 1, Data familiarization, activity. Oscar, of course, like asking verbally for consent all the time can get awkward though and sometimes even ruin the mood, but it's so easy to tell though non-verbally when someone isn't into it. For example, you might go up to someone and put your arm around them, and if they step away, then that's immediately showing you that they're not consenting, and you know not to do that again. If you're interested in the person, you may talk to them a little bit more, and then when they show you that reciprocal, but then for most people it's easy to pick up on, yet some people might not be able to realize if they're not experienced with women or men. They might just not understand that. TW/CW for consent/assault. Phase 1, Data Familiarization, Activity. Initial agreement that verbal consent is important but impractical. Consent discussions are framed as questions here that can be awkward and kill the mood. Overly formal. Nonverbal consent perceived as simple and easy to understand, but only for the experienced. TW/CW for consent/assault. Phase 2, Coding the data. Line by line, or every two. Interesting features of the data. Interesting use of words, descriptive phrases, repetition. Meaningful to the area / topic of interest. Phase 2, Coding the data. Systematic and transparent approach. Code interesting features. Gather all data relevant to each code. Single meaning / facet in relation to something. Fine grain to get at the intricacies, what is analytically relevant and the underlying idea / concept / take. Codes identify a feature of the data which is interesting to the analyst, and that can be assessed in a meaningful way regarding the phenomenon under investigation. Boyatzis, 1998. p. 63. Analogy, Brinks of a house. Phase 2, Coding the data. Simple label / description. More than a single word. Identifies what is of interest. Captures meaning identified. Semantic, surface meaning, or latent, assumptions underpinning the surface meaning. Code by hand or electronically. Phase ends with a list of codes and all the data relevant to each code collated, important for next phase. Phase 2, Coding the data, activity. Oscar, of course, like asking verbally for consent all the time can get awkward though and sometimes even ruin the mood, but it's so easy to tell though non-verbally when someone isn't into it. For example, you might go up to someone and put your arm around them, and if they step away, then that's immediately showing you that they're not consenting, and you know not to do that again. If you're interested in the person, you may talk to them a little bit more, and then when they show you that reciprocal, but then for most people it's easy to pick up on, yet some people might not be able to realize if they're not experienced with women or men. They might just not understand that. TW/CW for consent/assault. Phase 2, Coding the data, the 30th of October, 2024, the 11th of October, 2024. Oscar, of course, like asking verbally for consent all the time can get awkward though and sometimes even ruin the mood, but it's so easy to tell though non-verbally when someone isn't into it. For example, you might go up to someone and put your arm around them, and if they step away, then that's immediately showing you that they're not consenting, and you know not to do that again. If you're interested in the person, you may talk to them a little bit more, and then when they show you that reciprocal, but then for most people it's easy to pick up on, yet some people might not be able to realize if they're not experienced with women or men. They might just not understand that. Verbal consent awkward. Verbal consent equals mood killer. Consent is displayed through reciprocity. Refusal evident through nonverbals. Experience with opposite sex. Necessary to understand refusal / Consent. Refusal is clear. TW/CW consent/assault. Phase 3, generating initial themes. Collate the codes into potential themes, i.e. aspects of similarity and difference. Cluster all codes. Gather all the data relevant to each theme. A theme should effectively describe what you have identified as a key/distinct feature of the data. A theme captures something important about the data in relation to the research question, and represents some level of patterned response or meaning within the data set. Braun and Clark. 2006, 82p. Common question. What is the difference between a theme and code? Codes are more specific. Capture a single idea/meaning associated with a segment of data. Fine-grained and capture intricacies. Codes form the basis of theme. Phase 3, generating initial codes. Codes. Body language is subjective/unclear. Verbal consent is rare. Consent is displayed through reciprocity. Verbal cues are black and white. Alcohol affects consent. Verbal consent is awkward/mood killer. Don't always ask, do you want to have sex? Alcohol means person can't consent. Easy to tell when someone isn't into it. Situational factors impact consent. Confidence affects consent. Body language speaks for itself. Refusal evident through nonverbals. Experience with opposite sex necessary to understand refusal/consent. Themes. These codes distinguish one sort of material from another. Some codes have more to do with one another than others. TW/CW for consent/assault. Body language is subjective/unclear. Verbal consent is rare. Consent is displayed through reciprocity. Verbal cues are black and white. Alcohol affects consent. Verbal consent is awkward/mood killer. Don't always ask, do you want to have sex? Alcohol means person can't consent. Easy to tell when someone isn't into it. Situational factors impact consent. Confidence affects consent. Body language speaks for itself. Refusal evident through nonverbals. Experience with opposite sex necessary to understand refusal/consent. Codes are groups in terms of similarities. TW/CW for consent/assault. Codes. Body language is subjective/unclear. Verbal consent is rare. Consent is displayed through reciprocity. Verbal cues are black and white. Alcohol affects consent. Verbal consent is awkward/mood killer. Don't always ask, do you want to have sex? Alcohol means person can't consent. Easy to tell when someone isn't into it. Situational factors impact consent. Confidence affects consent. Body language speaks for itself. Refusal evident through nonverbals. Experience with opposite sex necessary to understand refusal/consent. Themes. Codes are groups in terms of similarities. TW/CW for consent/assault. TW/CW for consent/assault. Experience with opposite sex needed to understand refusal/consent. Refusal evident through nonverbals. Codes. TW/CW for consent/assault. Phase 4, reviewing and developing themes. Start to identify the nature or character of this potential theme. Is this a theme? What does / doesn't it include? What are the boundaries of this theme? How does it relate to other potential themes? Are there enough, meaningful, data to support this theme? Check if the theme works in relation to the coded extracts and the entire data set. Generate a candidate thematic map, optional. Phase 5, Refining, Defining and Naming Themes. Assign a name / label to each theme or category. Avoid one-word theme names. Avoid topic summary names. Produce a definition / description of each theme. Refine the specifics of each theme and the overall story of your analysis. Theme 1, Verbal consent are black, white and gray. Theme 3, Consent is affected by situational and personal factors. Theme 2, Body language conveys agreement and refusal but is open to misinterpretation. TW/CW for consent / assault. How to name themes. As quotes or verbal cues are black and white and gray. Body language is important but can also be subjective. It should be clear but it depends. As statements. Verbal consent should be black and white. Body language conveys agreement and refusal but is open to misinterpretation. Consent is affected by situational and personal factors. TW/CW for consent / assault. Phase 6, Producing the report. Analysis consists of analytic commentary, data extracts and themes. Decide on the order in which to present your themes. Tell a story and move the analytical narrative on. Select vivid and compelling examples of data to illustrate each theme. Different participants. Phase 6, Producing the report writing. Provide an analysis, not just a description, of each theme and specific excerpts included. Relate analysis to the research topic / question and to the literature. The write-up should refer to literature. For example, this supports the findings of Blogs, 2010, and Smith, 1995, who identify. This echoes existing literature that demonstrates. Phase 6, Producing the report. Remember what codes make up each theme. Helpful when writing up and for analytical narrative. Look back at grouping or thematic map. Factor in time to develop analytical narrative for themes and quotes presented. Requires analytical effort. Interpretation needed for each quote / excerpt presented. Example of next slide. Ben, I think men need to be more careful around the whole consent thing just because you hear more stories in the media and cases of where they've been either wrongly accused of rape and sorta ruined their lives, or you don't, although it can happen the other way around. You don't tend to hear that as much on the female side, and I think it's definitely important for men to get consent. Liam, yeah, definitely. Men are positioned as needing to be more careful based on the view that they are vulnerable to false allegations of sexual assault. This is evident where Ben refers to stories as a means of highlighting this risk, but only for the accused. In acknowledging that false allegations can also work the other way around, but making a point of highlighting the rarity of this, you don't tend to hear that as much, only further serves to underscore the risk for men only. With an emphasis on legal consequences of consent and a preoccupation with false allegations for men, Young People's Talk echoes previous work that highlights the way young people frame consent as it relates to sexual assault. Brady et al., 2017, Whittington, 2020, but this talk also highlights the way such framing also invalidates experiences of sexual violence. Coy et al., 2013. TW/CW for consent/assault. Tips for conducting a TA. It's messy. It's not often a linear process, for example steps 1 through to 6. Analysis is a recursive process. You learn by doing. Coding is fundamental. Don't skip data familiarization, step 1, and coding, step 2. Themes are developed from codes and are used to help write up later. Avoid vague codes, gender support. Things to consider. There shouldn't be too many themes, limited number. They should be analytically distinct, standalone. The theme titles should not repeat the research question. Themes should answer the researcher question. Themes should be supported with excerpts from the data. Select appropriate examples, those that highlight the point made most vividly. Don't let the quotes/excerpts do the talking. Common mistakes. Under-analysis. Not doing any analysis. Unconvincing and weak analysis. Too many themes or vague themes. Don't let the quotes do the talking. The researcher should interpret what data/quotes they present. Themes don't emerge. Avoid writing this in the write-up. Quality criteria, Braun and Clark, 2006. Quality criteria, Braun and Clark, 2006. Having a go. Activity. Activity, Phase 3 of TA. The topic of these interviews is Friendship Research Question: How do university students understand friendship when in higher education? Task. Using the transcripts from last week, have a go at creating themes from the codes you created last week. Make a list of the codes for Michael and Nadia. Phase 3 codes into themes. Michael. Nadia. Emotional support. Emotional support. Substitute / chosen family. Friends provide comfort. Lack of judgment. Lack of judgment. Lack of permanence / temporary. You can rely on friends. Friendship longevity. Friends provide closeness. Contact maintains friendships. Trust is key. Shared activities. Dependence. Friends important / necessity. Familiarity. Friends don't judge. Lack of permanence / temporary. You can rely on friends. Put the codes into groups. Tips. What codes are similar? What are distinct? Group codes across Michael and Nadia, list similar codes together. Create a list. Emotional support. Shared activities. Activity, Phase 4 of TA. Reviewing and developing themes. Task. Review the groups of codes and start to identify the nature or character of this potential theme. Tips. Is this a theme? What does / doesn't it include? What are the boundaries of this theme? How does it relate to other potential themes? Are there enough, meaningful, data to support this theme? Activity, Phase 5 of TA. Refining, defining and naming themes. Task. Assign a name / label to each theme or category. Avoid one-word theme names. Avoid topic summary names. Ensure they are titled in a way that answer the research question. Produce a brief definition / description of each theme. Feedback. Research question: How do university students understand friendship when in higher education? How many themes have you generated from this data? What are the theme titles? Reading. Clark, v. and Braun, v. 2021. Thematic Analysis, a Practical Guide. Thematic Analysis, 1 to 100, in Library. Braun, v. and Clark, v. 2020. One size fits all. What counts as quality practice in reflexive thematic analysis? Qualitative research in psychology, 1 to 25. 10.1080478887.2020.1769238. PSY 5046 Qualitative Research Methods. Workshop 6. How will you be assessed? A qualitative research report, 90%. 3,200 words, plus /10%. Thematic analysis. You must collect data from interviews with 2 participants. Topic: being a university student, choose one of 4 research questions. Deadline: Friday the 15th of December, 2023, 3 p.m. UK time. Where? Moodle submission point. Ethics quiz, 10%. Please read the guidance on Moodle for this assessment. Deadline: Friday the 27th of October, 2023, 3 p.m. Where? Moodle quiz. Today. Last time you drafted the design and participants subsections of your report. Today you will work more on the methods section of your report, ethics, materials, procedure, and analytic strategy subsections. The methods section of the report. This should provide a concise overview of what you did and why. This is so that anyone wanting to repeat what you did could do so. It is important to use references throughout this section to justify your approach. Looking at qualitative methods textbooks will help with this. There are 6 subsections in the methods. Method, 800 words. Design. Participants. Materials. Ethics. Procedure. Analytic strategy. Last time we looked at the design and participants subsections. This week we will focus on ethics, materials, procedure and analytic strategy sections. Task. In pairs or triads, download the BPS Code of Ethics and Conduct from Moodle. Discuss the following. What are the core principles of ethics that researchers should follow? How will you apply these principles in your own research? What is the reference for this document? You need to cite and reference this in your ethics section. Then open up the example research report again and review the ethics, materials, procedure, and chosen analysis sections. What have they used references for? What tense are these sections written in? The ethics subsection. This explains the ethical considerations you put in place in the designing and running of your project. In Lecture 3 we covered 5 core areas. Harm. Informed consent. Right to withdraw. Anonymity and confidentiality. Data protection. You need to cover all of these in your report. Remember that once you have ethical approval for your interview questions you will have access to an information sheet, consent form and debrief sheet that you must use with your participants. The ethics subsection. Core required information. Reference of ethical guidelines. What you did to ensure you were ethical. This should be short but informative. You are telling us what ethical guidelines you followed. And from who, and how you did this. You will need to reference the BPS, as they are our disciplining body, and explain what ethics were put in place for your participants to ensure no harm was committed to you or your participants, withdrawal rights, confidentiality, and help. Information sheet, consent form and debrief. As these forms have been supplied to you, you do not need to submit them with your assessment. Your transcripts, however, must be supplied in your appendices and will be checked for ethical conduct. The study was granted ethical approval by the Psychology Department in accordance to an information sheet describing a consent form. Participants were also informed. A debrief sheet. Key points to consider for the ethics subsection. Make sure that you refer to Lecture 3 when writing this section. The first thing that should be explained here is that ethical approval for the research was granted by the Psychology Department Ethics Committee and that you are following the BPS Code of Ethics and Conduct, 2019 or 2021. You then need to explain all of the things you have done to ensure that the study is ethical and that you have minimized the risk of harm to your participants. For example, you need to explain that participants were given an information sheet, that they signed a consent form, were debriefed after the interview, and why this was done. In explaining what you did, you need to focus on the participants' right to withdraw, how you protected their confidentiality and what help was available to them if they were upset. Make sure that this is written in the past tense. The materials subsection. This subsection explains any materials that you used when conducting the research, for example, interview schedule, MS Teams, for recording. Core required information. What you used with justifications, i.e. literature. This is where you should explain what materials you used, so you can provide more detail on the interview schedule devised. It is a good idea for this section to include examples of the questions you used within your interview. For example, the study utilized an interview schedule, Appendix A. Previous literature was reviewed to open-ended questions. Key points to consider for the materials subsection. The first thing you need to explain here is something about your interview schedule and explain how the questions were devised, for example from a pre-exiting list of questions devised by the module team. Give examples of 1 or 2 questions that were on your interview schedule. You should also explain that you used Microsoft Teams in order to conduct your interview and explain why this was appropriate. Make sure that this is written in the past tense. The procedure subsection. This explains exactly what you did when carrying out the research for this project. Core required information. What you did. Recruitment. Study. This section outlines exactly what you did, so if someone wished to replicate it, or follow it, they could do so without compromise. However, qualitative research is very rarely replicated, but the premise still stands as you need to be as informative as possible. Potential participants were approached. Ex-students were applicable. The participant was met for the interview and each participant was provided. Interviews lasted approximately. The participant was thanked. The interviews were transcribed using the analytic strategy subsection. Core required information. What analysis was chosen for the data? What the analysis does? How it is used? This is an important section of the method as it outlines the analysis. Take a look at published research articles to gain a better understanding of how they are presented, and please ensure to Use the Braun and Clark documents that have been suggested to you. You will be using thematic analysis, so follow your lecture notes, and do not make suggestions or claims that are used for other analyses. You also need to explain your theoretical position. Ontology and epistemology. In this section, how have you approached this research and this data? Are you doing this from a relativist and constructivist viewpoint? Thematic Analysis, TA, Braun and Clark, 2006, was utilized to. TA is most commonly used for. Guidelines suggest steps for TA. When organizing the data. Key points to consider for the analytic strategy subsection. This section explains how you analyzed your data. For this we are using thematic analysis, and you need to explain why this was suitable using academic references. You should outline the steps involved in undertaking a thematic analysis. See Braun and Clark, 2006. When you have analyzed your data, you should come back to this section to make it more specific. For example, to give examples of the coding you used. Make sure that this section is written in the past tense. Task. You should use this session to draft the remaining subsections of the methods. Make sure you follow the advice we have given here and in the assessment guidance document. Make sure that you ask your tutor questions. Other tasks to do. Make sure you have watched the video about recording interviews on Teams. Ensure you have completed the ethics quiz by 3 p.m. Friday the 27th of October. Ensure you have submitted your interview schedule for ethical review by 3 p.m. Friday 27th October. Continue literature searching and drafting your literature review. Finish drafting the methods sections we have worked on today and last week. When you receive ethical approval, through Moodle, for your interview questions, you can carry out your interviews. Next week. Private Study Week. Use next week's Private Study Week to carry out your interviews. Also ensure you are up to date with all parts of the report so far. Welcome to Introduction to Psychology. I am your seminar leader. A little about me. Why I chose to study psychology. Where I went to university. My research. My plans for future research. Outside of work, I enjoy. A little about you. Introduce yourself, name, pronouns, and tell us a fun fact. What to expect from this module. Weekly online lectures, around 2 hours of content. Weekly on-campus seminars, 1 hour of activities, 1 hour of guided reading. Weekly required reading, this may be a book chapter, a journal article, a newspaper article, a TED Talk. Any combination of the above. This is where your module leader will post any module updates. Please check weekly. This is where you should post any questions that you have about this module, and a member of staff will respond ASAP. Just below the announcements and Q&A forum, you will find the module schedule. This will tell you what you are learning this week, which lecturer has recorded that lecture, and your required reading for the week. And here is the note-taking template that you will need to complete in the guided reading part of your seminar. You can print this off yourself, or bring your laptop to class and complete it on there. I will bring spares just in case. Just below all of that information you will see these drop-down menus. If you open these drop-down menus, you will find more information. Under the Assessment tab, you will find all of the information you need to complete your assessments, as well as links to your assessments, quizzes, and submission points, final exam. We will go over these assessments in a few slides' time. Just below assessment information, you will find information on academic and well-being support. Just below assessment information, you will find information on academic and well-being support. And finally, we have your module content. Here you will find your lecture videos and slides, seminar slides and materials, and required reading information. Week 1 is quite simple, so I will also show you week 2. We can see next week, we have more required reading to complete. Also notice where it says hidden from students. This is because most of the content for the module is hidden from you and released weekly. So please make sure that you visit the Moodle page regularly to check for updates and newly released material. What to expect from this module? We will be covering classic theory, modern applications, and research ongoing at BCU in 4 key areas: social psychology, biological psychology, developmental psychology, cognitive psychology. Which key area are you most interested in learning about, and why? How will my learning be assessed? Moodle quizzes. For each topic, social, biological, developmental, and cognitive, you will need to complete a 25-question quiz on Moodle. Each quiz is worth 5% of your module grade, so the quizzes are worth 20% of your module grade in total. The dates that each topic will go live on Moodle are as follows: Social Psychology, Friday the 8th of October, 2021. Biological Psychology, Friday the 29th of October, 2021. Developmental Psychology, Friday the 19th of November, 2021. Cognitive Psychology, Friday the 3rd of December, 2021. Your quizzes are already on Moodle under the Assessments tab, but you won't have access to these until the date they are released. How will my learning be assessed? Moodle quizzes. The deadline for all quizzes to be completed is Friday the 10th of December, 2021 at 12 noon. These are open book quizzes, as you are completing these independently, and so you can use your notes to help you answer the questions. Once opened, you will have 24 hours to complete the quiz, so ensure that you are prepared to complete the whole quiz before you open the Moodle link. How will my learning be assessed? Exam. The exam questions will be released on the 14th of December, 2021, and the submission portal will be open for 48 hours between the 15th of December, 9 a.m., the 17th of December, 9 a.m. This at-home exam requires short answers, 500 words per question, 2,000 words in total, and is a little like coursework and an exam combined. You will be provided with examples of the types of questions to expect on this Moodle page, and your final seminar is dedicated to teaching you how to construct short answers. Each question will cover one topic of your Intro to Psych module: social, biological, cognitive, and developmental. You must answer all questions. Your answers must be 400 to 500 words long each, 2,000 in total, and with APA formatted in text. Citations: a reference list is not required. All of the information that you will need to answer these questions will be delivered in lecture videos, seminars, and in the core text and required reading. How will my learning be assessed? Exam. You can find some examples of exam questions on Moodle. Your exam can be found under the Assessments tab, and will be available to download from the the 14th of December at 9 a.m. Your exam will look like a cover sheet for you to fill in, with the exam questions at the bottom. You must answer the questions by writing in this document, and then submit this to the exam submission point below. Any questions regarding the module, or the assessments? Take a break. Please return after 10 minutes for the second half of the session. Guided Reading Hour. Reading academic articles at university can be a tricky skill to master. This module has been designed to help you to learn to read academic articles efficiently. Each seminar, except weeks 3, 5, and 7, during your guided reading hour, you will be expected to read an academic journal article of your choosing, and fill in the note-taking template for journal articles. This can be downloaded from Moodle and completed on laptops, or printed in advance to fill out by hand. I will also bring spares. During this time, you are welcome to complete your required reading, or choose another academic journal article to read.